I'd like to talk today about Hippocrates and the Hippocratic School and the connection between physics and technology. As I said, my history of the world is organized around physics in the very broad sense of any given culture's account of the external world. And they tend to fall into certain categories based upon certain commonalities in which thinking about nature is habitually done. Now, I talked about what we might call the default status, which was what I called myth physics. And you see a good and very nicely poetic example of that in the beginning of the Iliad, first book. We're in the middle of things, as is proper to any epic, and in the middle of things, there is an epidemic among the Greeks, which threatens to destroy their plan for conquering Troy. And there is concern that if this gets worse, they may be defeated not by the Trojans, but by an epidemic, a sickness. A priest of Apollo is consulted by Agamemnon and Achilles and the others, and he tells these heroes that the cause of their sickness, of this epidemic, is the fact that Apollo has been disgraced and ill-treated, because they have disgraced and ill-treated the priest of Apollo, whose daughter has been stolen and then turned into a slave by Agamemnon himself. So the idea is that things like natural catastrophes, like epidemics or tsunami or earthquakes, any of them in Science 1.0, in myth physics, would have been described through some elaborate story personifying the new things we've encountered. So when we encounter epidemic, we organize that and put it into the categories that are characteristic of our understanding of the external world more generally. In the earliest phase of civilization, that's a kind of a story where we personify things, like we give a personification to the cause of epidemics or tsunamis or earthquakes. Now, the next scientific revolution, which is the first big step up out of this mythological account of the world, as I said before, happened in two places, in Greece and China, about 600 BC and about 300 BC. And the result was similar in both cases. These were non-mythological, observation-based, and practical ways of manipulating the external world. And the reason why the technology developed in both Greece and China, or Greece and later Rome, is because they had, in large part, because they had a superior understanding of nature. This 2.0 series has stopped asking questions like, who caused that earthquake? Or who caused that epidemic? And they moved to the question, what caused that epidemic? Or what caused that earthquake? So the depersonalization of nature creates an objective external world. And that objective external world just does what it does. So if you believe that epidemics come up for Apollo, then making sacrifices to Apollo and making amends with Apollo, that makes perfectly good sense. On the other hand, you're only as good as your presuppositions. And if you're not presupposing that your epidemic is caused by some sort of will, some sort of intentional agent, then it's possible to look objectively at nature, and a process of observation and inspection will turn out to be much more useful in doing things like building canals or studying medicine, figuring out how to cure diseases. Many practical activities will be improved greatly by being brought in line with this new causal, mechanical account of the world, which leaves out all the magical stuff. What I mean here is that the process of applying science to practical activities in the world, I'm inclined to call applied science technology. And technology is what gives human groups their greater or lesser capacity to adapt to their environment. And it also gives them greater and lesser degrees of control over their neighbors. Because not only is no individual human being isolated, there are almost no cases of societies which are entirely isolated. There are a few still kept around. I believe North Sentinel Island is one. But the point is that there's no more isolated individuals, atomized individuals like Robinson Crusoe, than there are atomized, otherwise unknown societies, perhaps like Thomas More's Utopia, right, before it had been discovered. So not only are human beings social animals, but societies create social connections between each other and amongst each other. Right? So it turns out that physics, being foundational and in some ways directional for all applications and for all new thinking about these high-tech activities like architecture or medicine, you'll find that the new control over nature that's obtained when you get rid of the idea that you can cure people with a magic rattle and with a special medical song and a bunch of amulets, to the much more sophisticated idea that on the basis of observation by Hippocrates and his followers, which many generations on have accumulated quite a bit of information, they've seen cases like this before, and they can describe the various ways in which it turned out. And that allows for some degree of predictability. And that means their prognoses are generally more accurate than those of the earlier witch doctors. Right?